Hi, welcome to tonight's episode of Racial Perceptions. This is our seventh episode, I believe, and it will be and it will be our last live episode as well. So welcome, Cartessa and David.
Hello, thank you. Seventh and
Um,
final, we made it.
Yeah, seventh and final live episode. Doesn't mean that we won't have other episodes after tonight. It just means that the future ones won't be live necessarily. So tonight we're talking about interracial relationships, and David is back to help us talk about that. So
David.
I'm on the season finale.
Yeah, season finale. And, David, you are here to have this conversation with us. I'm actually very excited that you're here, and I'm excited to have this conversation. And so, that being said, I just kind of want to open it up to you to, I don't know, if you could just give us a little bit of a background on your relationships and as far as, interracial dating goes, if you can share a little bit about your experience with that.
So I guess first I would probably start off saying that, I'm in an interracial relationship myself. So my wife, she is white and she's also Native.
Okay.
So that's always something I really find quite interesting because she would be part of a tribe here in Washington, but her tribe's so small and it's about like, the bloodline percentages.
Gotcha.
So I don't really understand how all that works out. But, yeah, so she is white and Native. And so, being in an interracial relationship, especially like I remember kind of when we first started, I had a friend who she actually never told me this, but she's African American, and she was like, I love you, I love Hannah. I'm glad you guys are happy, but I can't stand that you guys are together. And I think I kind of hear that a lot from. I either hear it or see it from a lot of African American women, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they I don't know what kind of perception that some women have as to why I'm with who I'm with, and it has nothing to do with whether she's white or Native or Chinese, whatever the case is. My thing was, I met my wife at the right time, and I fell in love with her, and nothing else would matter. And it's not like I didn't date anybody, any African American women, any Haitian women, Spanish, Asian. I've dated like all different kinds of races, and I don't necessarily had a preference until I found my wife, and then I was like, okay, this is the one. I think that anybody who is married, I think they all feel that it's the same kind of way that I feel.
Right.
You find somebody you love, and the rest ends up becoming history.
Yeah, go ahead, Cartessa.
I think that with the whole history of interracial dating, I mean, if we can just start with the foundation of it, it was something that back in it was like illegal until I believe like late 50s, early 60s. And so the context of interracial dating at its basis had like this negative connotation for African American women. It was kind of like, it's not it's not safe to do. It's not a smart thing to do. I mean, it just kind of had like all these mixtures in it when you go back into the history. And then as it has evolved, you still have some Black women that kind of have that same, just from the psychological standpoint, that, thank you, Mrs. Davidson, from that psychological standpoint, that feel as though it can still be something that's dangerous, or it can still be something that's not in the best interest of the Black man, which is the counterpart to the Black woman. So I think in that sense, there's still might be some struggle from it. I don't necessarily know if it does just come from the Black woman. I don't necessarily know if Black men, and maybe you can shed some light on that, David. I don't know if it's necessarily just on one part or the other, because I do know that recently we've had, or I've run into conversations where Black women have been dating white men, and there's been backlash about that as well. I just think it's interesting that the Black man with the white woman is like the epitome. It's almost like the poster relationship when you think of interracial dating. And there's so many other types of um, interracial couples that are in the United States that are together. They're very happy. And I can only think that because of like the racial undertones that have come from decades ago that have carried with us, systemically, it kind of has that slow drag to acceptance, when it shouldn't necessarily have it, but um, and not everyone would have that same viewpoint, but it seems to me that that's something that would be a hang up, you know. I know personally myself, I feel very very unnerved about um the instance of white women that accuse Black men of rape or sexual assault or falsely accused. And the amount of cases that have, come through this country over decades, it there is a feeling of uneasiness. But I have to be conscious and know that the story, I can't even think of the couple that their last name was Love.
Yeah.
The interracial
Forgiveness for
couple.
lovers.
Yeah. So I mean that, like, how beautiful was that? Like, yes. And so I mean I think that there's a lot of things, a lot of factors that go into it that are more so based, unfortunately, on systemic oppression that go back to systemic racism, And I think that if we hadn't had to deal with that and overcome that and still overcome and still deal with it, like it's something that's still a prevalent issue to this day, I think that we would have a much more open atmosphere and we wouldn't be so paranoid about it and have these kind of subconscious worries and doubts about the relationship, if that makes sense. I don't know. What do you think?
So I'm thinking about how to best address all of your kind of thoughts and try to conceptualize this. But I would probably say, as far as with interracial relationships, I think that a lot of African American women, a lot of our sisters, they have our best interests at heart, and they're like, they live in that constant state of fear because up until recent, like before we had like all these DNA tests, brothers were going to jail, like, just like the whole entire Emmett Till situation. Like, I know I talked about him last time I was on the podcast, but, it's the same situation. And then, 40, 50 years later, she's like, this is what really happened.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely fear there. But by that same token, in that same instance, just talking about particularly sex in America, I don't think that we actually have really good sex talks. I don't know we're supposed to be talking about race, but just kind of bear with me. And so, so with my, with my grandma, my mom, all my aunties and stuff like that, they were very outspoken about, you should have sex with the woman that you love when you're married, when you're ready, all that stuff. But also they talked about consent, and they talked about conception, and they talked about condoms. And I don't think that that's like preached in America too often. And so when you do have these incidents and stuff like that, and this is how I'm going to raise all my children and, teach all my clients, like if that actually comes up in the sessions, but like, the real important part about the whole entire ideal is like consent. So it was really interesting. I was watching a TV show called Daybreak. It was a post-apocalyptic show, and this girl she was ready to have sex with her boyfriend. She had an app, and she listed out all of her partners every time she got tested. What she was willing to do and what she's not willing to do. And so, with that being said, I think like these conversations are very important to have because, like, if I were to enter in a relationship and I did something that somebody didn't like, whether they were drunk or not, whether we did it all the time or not, it's still all about consent. And like, even though it's like, okay, this is what happens all the time, we always do this. If I didn't have consent and we didn't talk about it and stuff like that, I would be held liable. And so I think that's the reason why it's so important to have these conversations with your kids. So I think that's kind of how the way that I was raised, and like that's kind of like how I would like kind of go about teaching some and stuff like that, because like ultimately I think you should wait for the right one. But I know realistically, like kids are going to be kids, teenagers are going to be teenagers, adults are going to be adults. Like it seems like it's natural for the human body to explore. But at the same time, like you definitely want to teach consent and boundaries. So that's super important. And so I wasn't ever too much worried about being in a interracial relationship from that aspect, just because I think I was taught so well by my grandparents, my aunts, my mom, the whole nine. So that was one piece. And then I think you talked about how, what Black women see, and I can't speak for Black women. I can speak on what has been spoken to me. And a lot of it was like, why are you dating a white girl? Why don't you come find a sister? And so there's two answers to that. A, I did at one point in time. And B, there are no, actually, let me kind of backtrack, because I was going to say there are no sisters in our field, but clearly not. But it's really, I imagine you guys find yourself being the minorities. But like, if you think about like my professional surrounding, like I am surrounded by, Caucasian women. And so with that being said, like, it made sense of the way I found my wife, or the women I dated, because, they were all kind of in my profession. So, or kind of like in my circle. So I think it kind of makes sense. But it has nothing to do with the fact that, like, I don't like Black women, or, whatever a lot of them were thinking. It had more to do with the fact that, like, who I was dating was, just kind of in my circle. And, I had, a lot of Black women in my circle as well, but at the same time, not nearly as many, just because of the fact that, like, they weren't in my programs and I didn't have, like, access, for lack of a better term. And then secondly, you were talking about how African-American women are dating white men. I'm in a happy relationship, but sometimes I just find that shocking. And not that I'm racist or anything, or like, not that I want to be with those women, but like, it's just something that I'm not accustomed to seeing. But then on the flip side, I have all these voices in my head, like, okay, why are you dating a white girl? And I see her, and then all that just kind of, ruminates. Like so it is not, I'm just shocked, and I'm happy for them. Like, if you guys are happy, then, be happy. And I think that's the most important thing in a relationship. It's like, happiness. So I don't see the point of, stopping that.
I think that in order to like move forward in regards to like being a healthier community, the African American community, we are going to have to get over that. We are going to, we are going to have to get to a point where, we are okay with our counterparts, whether it be male or female, dating outside the other race, or dating outside the race, and being happy and being healthy. I know that for me, it's going to be difficult because I can identify it. I can say I have trouble because, and it's because of systemic oppression, like and as a Black woman, I'm ingrained and I'm trained and I was raised to be afraid of things for you, David, that you might not be aware of. Like I was just kind of taught to fear for these things for you that you necessarily as a man weren't it wasn't focused on. Like your mom and your grandma taught you consent and taught you different things. While I was taught, uh, it's not okay for, Black men to be with white women necessarily, because sometimes it can be consensual and then until it's not, like um there was a lot of instances where it would be, and I've just seen it on the news, and I've seen it like, cases upon cases of Black men that had amazing futures, like we're going places, and were like that, our encounter was consensual, and then like their whole lives were ruined because all of a sudden it wasn't, and just like the Emmett Till situation, it was, he did come on to me, and then all of a sudden he didn't. Not all of a sudden, like 40 years later, but there was a change in that dynamic. There was a change in that narrative. So to me, that vision is like danger, danger, and it's something that I have to be conscious, aware, because I want um African American men, like my Black counterparts, to be happy no matter who they're with or what they're doing. I want to support them because that's how we're going to be strong. That's how we're going to. So be, as long as you're happy, then I got your back. I have trouble with, because that's what a systemic oppression has done to me, has put that burden of fear and danger on the back of the Black woman for the Black man, we were talking, the last time we talked, we were talking about police brutality and stereotyping, and I mean, these are all things that the dangers for Black men are much, much, much more higher. So I have to, be conscious of that, and I have to be aware of that. There was like a whole movement, I have a Black son, and I have a Black brother and, nephew and all that kind of stuff. And that's true. That's like the narrative of the Black woman. So I think that once systemically we can move forward and like address that oppression, then I think that maybe the idea that interracial relationships. Can I talk today? Interracial relationships are dangerous. We'll fade with that. We'll fade with that. And as long as we continue to do our part, we continue to support each other, we continue to talk and make these conversations known, be vulnerable, be truthful, talk about what ails us, talk about where we want to go from there, I think that can help us. I think that, having these conversations is what's going to get us through this, and what's going to, get us past that to the next point, to be an even better, stronger entity as a community, as a Black community.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, the other thing that I've heard a lot is the white woman will not necessarily understand what it's like to be with a Black man, or the experience of being in a Black family, because like the experiences are different. So I've heard that one a lot. And then of course there's also the perception, which is also rooted I think in systemic racism and systemic oppression, that this Black person dating or married to a white person is kind of like a traitor because they're with this person of the race who oppressed us and stuff. So I think that like those perceptions have definitely affected, people in interracial relationships and stuff. So
Yes.
that brings me to a question for you, David. If you wouldn't mind sharing, did you feel like when you brought your wife home and you introduced her to your family, were they pretty open and accepting, and vice versa?
I would say 100%. So I've got two white aunts. Um, I've got family members in my family who are married to, people who are, black but of other ethnicities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's like, a common misconception among individuals who are not black. So like, some people who are like, Jamaican, they don't classify themselves as African American. Same thing with like the Haitian population. Same thing with the Hispanic community. Like, just because you're Cuban, you're not Mexican. Like you're Cuban. So so yeah, I have family members who have dated outside their races, and my family has always been, super accepting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of like, the really strong benefits of like, being in my family. And so whether I had brought home a black girl or a white girl, my family always decided if they were going to accept her based on how much she loved me. And I think that's how all families should be. So I've had girlfriends where my family just flat out didn't like him because she was like, yeah, I don't like the way you love my son. And so that's the one thing that my wife particularly lets me know. It's like she feels so much value in it because she knows how much they love me. And there's no reason for them to actually love her the way they do. And it doesn't like really often make sense, but they'll do whatever they can for her because they love me, and they love the way that she loves me. So
that's really
good for
sweet.
her. Yeah, good for
That's
her.
really sweet. Yeah,
Good for her.
that is
But
pretty
that's
sweet.
that's that, that woman mentality, that black woman mentality. I, I, I'm going to protect, my black son, and I want to make sure that he's safe and he's happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is absolutely fabulous. I really do,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of couples don't receive as as warm as a welcome as that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I,
And I think that even outside of, your family members and your friends, I think that some interracial couples get, I don't know if profiled is the right word, but some of them, get the look like, oh, like it's a black and white couple, or it's this black and Hispanic couple. Like they kind of get those sneers and stuff. And I think that
yeah.
that's an issue, and that's very disrespectful, and it can definitely be hurtful. So I do recognize that interracial couples have different experiences and I guess different struggles to address, or to like they have to go through these different things that couples of the same race don't necessarily go through, because even though we feel like we've made so much progress in this area, like we're so progressive and we're moving forward, we're headed to the future, there's still a lot of people who are like, no, this shouldn't be happening, stay within your race, or like all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Um,
I want to be vulnerable and say this. Um, I have dated outside of my race before, but had the, I have never brought someone that was not my race home to my family, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that was like a conscious thing or
mm-hmm.
like a subconscious thing, or I don't know. Like, and because I'm just now kind of coming to that realization, I can say, oh, well, yeah, I've dated, all kinds of ethnicities and different kind of races, but I've never brought someone home to meet, my mother and my siblings, or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, that was not African American. And so I think that says a lot about
Mm-hmm.
just where I am in that process and that perception, like, is it fear? Is it subconscious? And how far that, um, how far like we've come, in
Mm-hmm.
that process. So, and how far we still need to go
Yeah.
in that process. Um, I don't know what, as we were talking about families, I wanted to, chime in and say,
Yeah.
oh, my family was accepting, and
Mhm.
this and that. But that wasn't necessarily the case.
Mhm.
It wasn't, because I never, you know, had that opportunity to have that experience. It's just not something that um, I've had the opportunity to do. So
Mhm.
I think that that's interesting in regards to
Yeah.
um, and being a black woman, and then a black man. I wonder if it would have been different. I wonder if I would have
Mhm.
had, you know what I mean, been able to have, not been able to, but I wonder if I would have been more uh, able or acceptable to an interracial relationship where I could have brought them home and introduced them and been like comfortable with doing it. And I mean, I don't have um any I want to say that I don't have any type of like ill feelings towards interracial couples, and I'm very close to a lot of people that, I mean, I don't want to put them out because of their privacy, but I'm very close to a lot of people that are in
Mhm.
interracial relationships, and I love them very much. um I just was kind of coming to that conclusion, like, hey, it's not something that I've ever done.
Mhm.
And even when you think of other different diverse communities, when you think of LGBTQIA plus, then you can you see how even then, um, in a black family or a white family, they might be even more apt to be more accepted, as opposed to having an interracial partner. you
Mhm.
know like, I've seen that happen a couple of times, to
Mhm.
where the person is a member of the LGBTQIA community, and then they've had um, partners that are different races, and they come to me in a clinical setting, and with the issue of their family not being okay with their partner being a
Mhm.
different race, not
Mhm.
necessarily the same gender.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that racist bias is I'm hoping it's slowly going to change. But we don't know this. So and kind of thinking about like some of the girls that I try to date. One in particular, like I'm just thinking about the fact of like who I am. I feel like I'm a well-educated individual. I've got all my stuff kind of lined up. Um, and so I kind of went to church. Was going to talk to the dads like, hey, I really want to start dating your daughter. Like, what do you think? But dad wasn't there, so I told mom. And mom, she got teary eyed because and I assumed that she got teary eyed because she was thinking I'm so sweet. Not the case. And yeah,
Oh
but
no.
then she ended up letting her daughter date somebody who was, not really good for her. um, you know, and then you see like these families who will put up with just other things other than a black person. So they can be on drugs, they can be abusive, they can be X, Y, and Z, but because they're black, it's automatic no go, just based off of
Mhm.
stereotypes.
Mhm.
And then speaking of stereotypes, I think one of the things that I probably should touch on is the fact that even when I was dating with inside my own race, sometimes I wasn't black enough for women,
Mhm.
and I I always found that like kind of heartbreaking. I actually
I'm going to
remember when
say
I
this,
was
someone very close to me, a black man that is very, very close to my heart, um, told me the exact same thing. And I find that very interesting. He said that there was a type of disrespect that he felt from the black woman, or a type of like rejection because of the fact that he was a certain way, or because he didn't act a certain way. And I thought that that was just horrible, and just distasteful on her part, and goes to show uh, how we need to be aware of what our mission is here, to unite ourselves as a community, and no matter who and what. I mean, it has to be radical acceptance at this point. I feel
Absolutely.
like. But anyway, I want to hear the rest of your story. I'm sorry, David. Go, please, please go.
Oh, yeah. So I was just actually going to tell you about my grandfather because I remember, I think it was like in the sixth or seventh grade. And, this is when I first actually realized, like, okay, there's something wrong with this thinking. I was like, but I don't necessarily like this person because she acts white. And my grandpa, in his infinite age of wisdom, he kind of sat back and he was like, okay, what do you mean? And so I started describing this girl, and I was like, okay, she is X, Y, and Z. And I don't actually even remember what it was said. But just kind of like, thinking back to it, I think the fact that she was like well organized, had all her stuff together, made good grades.
Could code switch.
Excuse me?
She could code switch.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, in all actuality, like, this is, somebody that, like, deserves all the respect, and I wasn't giving it to her. So, I mean, I think I learned that at I guess I was in sixth grade, so that's not super early age, but I mean, I think these are important lessons to teach. And, like, I think too often society places intelligence with race. So, unfortunately, you see, like, in the Asian community, like, you're supposed to be good with math, or in the Jewish community, you're supposed to be good at finances. But that's not the case. Like, there are several brilliant mathematicians who are, Black, Asian, Hispanic. Doesn't matter what the culture is. And so I think we need to stop, using race as an indicator of, like, certain attributes of a person.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
I absolutely agree. And I think that this goes to show how important it is for each one of us, to challenge our own biases, because we all have them, and be aware of those things, and be aware of how even ourselves, like individually, we put other people and ourselves in these categories that oftentimes are very limiting, very stereotypical. Things get very judgmental when we do that, and we lose respect for other people, and we get into arguments, and before you know it, like, it's a whole meltdown and stuff.
It
So
ruins the whole relationship, and it's hurtful. It's hurtful. And when you even, like, I was reading the comment from, I was trying to keep up with these comments, but I mean, I love the interaction, but, like, 6, 7 years ago, I had a completely different outlook on interracial dating. I thought that, it was something that was dangerous. Like, I mean, not dangerous, but, I had reservations behind it because and I had to dig deep. I had to think about, what is that, and I had to bring it back to oppression, and I had to know that that was an ingrained way of thinking, and that it can be unlearned, and I can have radical acceptance, and that's something
Right.
that's an ever going process, ever going, and having conversations like these where you can say, in a safe space, with colleagues or friends, you can say, this is how I feel, and how do you feel? And then you can listen to them say, well, this is how I feel, and these are the experiences that I've had, with, this very hot, sensitive topic, obviously. But, I think that that is where the bread, the meat and the bread meet,
Mhm.
coming to this platform, and saying that, hey, this is the issue, because I don't represent the entire population of the African American woman, but I, can pretty much, kind of, describe some very widely believed ideals, because I've grown up being an African American woman. So, and you, a Black man, David, and also you, Winnie, a Black woman, can also, like, contribute to those ideals, and maybe, use your intelligence and your expertise to help us get to the bottom of it so we can kind of like unroot it. Or at least that's how I like to look at it, you know, when we talk about these topics that are hot topics in the country, you know. So I just hope that the conversation reaches someone and it encourages them to continue with the conversation or with the topic, and that it's done in a way that people feel safe, that people feel
Yeah.
okay, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to do this and get to the bottom of it without, doing more harm than good.
Mhm.
You know, being able to walk
Absolutely.
away from this conversation, the three of us having a conversation. Now, we're all clinicians. So we've been able to express ourselves and hear each other. So when we get off this live, we're going to be able to walk away like, oh my God, that was such a great conversation.
Mhm.
I'm glad that we were able to talk about that. And I'm glad I was able to say that and hear that. And it's unfortunate that, you know, we can't go into every house and sit at every
Yeah.
dinner table, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of what I look for, and that's just kind of what I hope
Mhm.
for, that eventually, you know, more people will want to have those tough conversations and be
Mhm.
vulnerable enough to care about the other person's
Mhm.
feelings
Mhm.
and to receive that.
I totally agree. I feel like this was a very good summary, and I kind of don't have anything else to add to that besides, you know, let's continue to do this work. It starts with each one of us individually and your home and your community. Let's start there, and hopefully, you know, in our lifetimes, we'll see some major changes, and we can look back on these times this year and be like, you know, we started something, we were a part of something, we did something.
Yeah.
So we're kind of out of time. But David, do you have any last words that you want to share before we get off?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David, for coming on
David.
and talking with us. Thank you, Cartessa, for doing this series with me. Like I said, tonight was our last live episode, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to have future episodes. They just won't be live. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, who participated in the conversation. We'll be continuing the conversation in the comments with you and in the racial perceptions group. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, David. Thanks, Cartessa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.